Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, or as I like to call it, Suicide Squad killed by live service. This game is on its way out. There's no recovery. It is basically end of the road for a game that the second it was announced to be a live service, I knew that there was a good chance it was in trouble. I've already talked enough about its critical reception. More telling, I think, is the fact that only 19% of critics recommend it. I think that's really the true mark of whether a game will perform well or not. And it's the fact that so many people wouldn't recommend this game that's led to it financially flopping. I mean, there are not that many reviews here on Steam. Recent reviews are still mixed. And the general sentiment surrounding Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is that compared to Rocksteady's past endeavors, it's a bit of a tragedy. And Warner Brothers has already admitted back in February of 2024 that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has fallen short of our expectations. This is what was said a few weeks after the game's launch, but they didn't provide exact sales figures. And while they still haven't done so, we do know more information based on a recent Warner Brothers financial meeting and investors call. So here's a report from news outlet Forbes, whose headline reads, Warner Brothers blames Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League for quarterly miss. So a lot was riding on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League succeeding for it to maintain Warner Brothers financials, or thinking, well, it's a live service, it'll keep making money, and it'll make our numbers look good for quarters to come. That plan did not pan out at all, and so during a recent earnings call, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO said that contributing to losses in the company's quarterly financials was the disappointing release of Suicide Squad. They're still not sharing exact sales figures, and that's what companies tend to do when they're ashamed to show their numbers. Otherwise, they'd be talking about it nonstop. Here's how many millions we sold and whatnot. But reports are that apparently, according to Forbes here, they were lower than even the worst case scenario expectations for release. Even compared to the floor of what their expectations were, this game did worse than that. So that's a pretty sad state of affairs. Now, one interesting tidbit here from this Forbes article is the claim that the live service looter shooter angle was reportedly not forced by management, but it was Rocksteady's leadership who made the decision to pursue the game instead of alternatives. Apparently, it was Rocksteady who made the decision to turn Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League into a live service and not Warner Brothers. But here's another perspective from Jason Schreier, who kind of paints a potentially more nuanced picture. It states right here, I think gamers and sometimes reporters tend to oversimplify complex business realities to the point of inaccuracy. If, hypothetically, a developer chooses to pitch a game with live service elements because they suspect that otherwise it won't get greenlit, whose idea was it really? It's kind of like that thing companies do when they say, oh, you're not forced to crunch, there's no mandate to crunch. But also, if you don't crunch, that might show the company that you're less dedicated to your job and to the company. And so that might put you at a disadvantage in terms of moving up the ladder. So can you really say in a scenario like that, where there are unspoken and low-key consequences to not crunching, that crunch isn't mandatory? Or in this scenario, when the unspoken consequence of not pitching a live service game is that it's more likely that it won't get greenlit, can you really say that it was the studio's idea to go for a live service game instead of management, the folks at Warner Brothers, who've consistently said that they want to push towards a more live service-centric future? This is, I think, an interesting perspective worth keeping in mind. And it's also worth noting that Warner Brothers was more than happy to greenlight a live service version of the game. Warner Brothers did not stop Rocksteady and go, you know what? Why don't you not make a live service and instead lean into making a game that you specialize in, those single player experience akin to your best, most renowned games, the Arkham trilogy. The fact that Warner Brothers management didn't step in to ensure that Rocksteady's making the kinds of games that they're good at making, that is a failure of Warner Brothers leadership as well. And the end result of all of this is that it cost Warner Brothers $200 million in revenue. That's the kind of hit that Suicide Squad's failure as a live service and its long development cycle and the amount of money and resources it had to pour into this game only to deliver paltry results cost the company. Here's a quote from the company's Q1 earnings report that was put out there recently that reads Starting with studios, the $400+ million year-over-year decline during quarter one was primarily due to the very tough comp we faced in games against the success of Hogwarts Legacy last year in the first quarter. Basically had nothing compared to Hogwarts Legacy success this year in the most recent cycle of financial quotas that they had to meet, and Suicide Squad they were hoping would kind of be within that vein as far as financial success goes, but it was the complete opposite. So there's that in conjunction with the disappointing Suicide Squad release this past quarter, which we impaired, leading to a $200 million impact to EBITDA, which is an acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization during the first quarter. This is what CFO Gunnar Wiedelfels said during the investors' call that happened recently. $200 million is no paltry sum, even at the corporate level. That kind of revenue loss will definitely be felt by Warner Brothers executives. And frankly, I fear for Rocksteady's future. I fear that Warner Brothers will blame Rocksteady for this and will kind of cut their strings. And that would really piss me off, because ultimately that $200 million loss for Warner Brothers can be traced back to Warner Brothers' insistence on paving the road towards a more live service focused future and not stopping developers like Rocksteady, who are better at those single player games that are renowned across the world, from making a live service that they were not experienced in making and that they were bound to fail on, especially with an IP like Suicide Squad, where a live service-centric model and a looter-shooter model just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This report comes in shortly after the recent shutdown of another live service that was made by a studio that specializes in single-player games but was pressured into making a live service. I'm, of course, talking about Redfall, and tragically, it also led to the shutdown of Arcane Austin, who, yes, flopped with Redfall, but when they were in an environment where they could cook properly, they made games like Dishonored and Prey, which are some of the most critically acclaimed. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League launched on February of 2024. I would bet you that by February of 2025, like at the latest, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League will cease development. They'll cease updating the game. I'd be willing to bet that by then, we're going to see a pretty similar announcement to this one in regards to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. They'll keep servers up so players can go back and play it. But in terms of its roadmap and fulfilling the promises that they made and updating it with substantial new content, that's going to end very soon. It's just not worth spending money on this game that's already sunk Warner Brothers revenue by $200 million. Warner Brothers wants to get rid of this black sheep as fast as possible so that they can move on to more potentially profitable ventures. That revenue loss is already big enough. Why would they want to make that hole deeper for a game that only gets 158 24-hour peak concurrent players a day, which, by the way, is less than the 24-hour peak concurrent players that a dead live service game like Marvel's Avengers gets? It's as good as dead. There would be some hope if, season one indicated that they were dedicated to substantial content additions, but this season that also added Joker as a playable character was kind of a complete joke. Just rehashed content, not much in the way of new campaign story elements. Joker as a character was locked either behind a grind wall or a paywall. There were no new mission types. There was really nothing here that made the game more fun. It was just a lot of grindy, repetitive crap that did not bode well for the game's future, which is why players have just quit en masse. They just don't see any point in hoping that this game will get better. They don't see any hope in placing hope in the future of this game if that's the kind of content addition we can expect from here on out. And then live service elements like the Battle Pass was made all the more egregious by the fact that it would take 1,500 missions to get through it for those who don't shell out additional money. Through the Battle Pass, through the lackluster Season 1 content edition and the introduction of Joker, it just felt like this game did not respect the time and money of the players. And yet, despite all of this, despite the universe telling Warner Brothers, stop relying so heavily on live services, here we have Warner Brothers saying that they want to move away from AAA games and focus more on live services, or at least that was what they said not too long ago, back in March 5th, 2024. And I get the sense that the executives, being the fucking morons that they are, they're not going to budge on this. They're still going to try to push for a move that utterly failed them with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Whereas with Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy, which was not a live service, but a fully fleshed out single-player campaign-driven experience that people could immerse themselves into in this world that, is very popular and beloved across the world, that is what ended up being the thing that carried them. And yet instead of leaning towards that, they want to lean towards the ventures that fail them, make it make sense. Again, executives are just, I don't know how they have the positions and jobs that they do. But anyway, this is the latest on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Yeah, the clock is ticking. There's a countdown for its eventual shut off is kind of what I'm thinking. Like there's no sign of life here. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Warner Brothers' recent financial reports on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League's performance and what you think the future holds for the title. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.